rotate device back. See it. Oh, hang on. Orientation is
That's what I told you.
Well, get it out of locked orientation then.
That's not what... Julie, do you understand this? No, I can't even set this up. This thing is damaged. Right? I needed to set it up so it was allowing me to go the other way. Right? It needs to go the other way. There we are.
Okay.
Lock. Are we live?
Yeah, I see you. Yes, we are.
Yes. I need that back. It took us a while because the device won't let us go in orientation. Anyway, we're here.
Yeah.
Equipment failures. Usually I go in landscape and it wouldn't let me do it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
We need to get a tripod.
All right, you start talking.
I'm talking. Anyway, hello Sue. Hi everyone. Julie's just going to get another tripod because we had all this set up and for some reason YouTube wouldn't let us go in landscape, but now it is.
The other tripod's out in the car.
But we can go this way, I guess, because obviously YouTube. So you hear me?
Is that any help?
No.
Oh, the tripod's in the car.
No, just come here.
All right, just come here. Okay. Okay, all right.
Yeah, because if I turn it the other way, you won't hear us. So guess what? One day I'm going to get this shaky cam worked out, but it looks like just Julie's logged in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted it to go the other way, and I usually set up in a way that I understand it, but for some reason the orientation's locked. Anyway, let's just move on, because that's just rubbish, isn't it? Anyway, look, it was going to be, it's just...
How about I hold it?
You hold it? Yeah.
How about I hold it?
No.
All right.
On both of us.
On both of us, all right.
So you're going to shake. I usually do a little bit better than Jules.
Oh, okay.
See, when usually I'm holding it in the car, I do a lot better. So I'll hold it. Next time, I will not rely on Julie's equipment because it's just doesn't work. And it's probably because the settings on YouTube, I like to put my settings in landscape, and to go live, it defaults to portrait, and you know, Julie does stuff for her channel, but you can put it in any way you want to put it. And when you go live, it defaults to portrait, and then you have to set that up. It didn't give me options. Yeah, we learn from this shit. Next time I will not be doing this.
Isn't it to do with the setting on your phone that locks rotation?
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got 11 people there now. Okay.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Julie's supposed to be watching the chat. If I talk, that's just our dogs. Right there is our dogs. That's Pammy. That's Pammy. Woo-hoo. Come on, Pammy. And this is Zoe. They're our pups.
And for some reason, they've been barking at shadows this morning.
Yeah, and look, anyway, this is not a dog thing. We're losing people. We've come here because we're going to do a weekly, and we're starting to do our weeklies on Fridays.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd like to say thank you to all our Lost in South Oz subscribers, and you know, thanks for watching our videos. Now, we were thinking about what to do every Friday, and Friday, as you know, our channel is, you know, on South Australia and on history and on railway. Unfortunately, me and Julie came from New South Wales, and I grew up in New South Wales as a kid riding on red rattlers. And what was a red rattler? I mean, if you look up red rattler these days on the interweb on the internet, red rattlers are. It's really hard to find them because I did a wild search on Google, and you get taken to America and other places like that.
Okay, for the South Aussies here, think an 8-car red hen train.
And red.
Yeah, red hens were generally red.
Yeah, but they were like,
So if you think of an 8-car red hen train, then you'll have an idea of Sydney red rattlers.
yeah. But you see, red rattlers weren't always red. There were some blue ones.
Sometimes they were blue and white. In the mid-70s, we had a change of name with the administration to Public Transport Commission, and they changed their colour scheme to blue and white, which they began putting on their trains and their ferries and their buses.
And that was what, the PTC?
The PTC.
Public Transport Commission. Then we had, Anyway, so as a kid, I don't know what most people's experience of getting on a train these days is, but it's pretty safe.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't safe when I was a kid.
No.
You used to hang out of the trains, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anyway, what were we going to talk about?
We had a couple of... You had the story of at Rhodes with the...
Hey, weren't... Oh, we would hang out the doors too. I mean, seriously, there was no security on those trains when we were kids. Absolutely none. And no, answer on here, Julie.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right. There was absolutely no... Yes. The technical term was the doors were manually operated.
There was nothing automatic about anything. I think we didn't even see automatic doors until C-sets, and a lot of the Tulloch cars then got fitted out. So
They did.
to understand that the old red rattlers were Tulloch cars, and they were made in Rhodes in Sydney. So to understand, it was called Tulloch Manufacturing Company in Rhodes. So this is a plate of what you would see in the middle of the doorway, and
Yeah, okay, because it's on front camera, it's actually reversed.
it's reversed. But anyway,
Yeah.
but so at Rhodes Station, which is I guess one up from Concord West,
Near Strathfield.
near Strathfield, all the cars were made in Sydney. And they were manufactured, from the 1920s?
Oh, gee, the answer's a little more complicated.
Yeah, it is.
The later ones were manufactured in Tulloch, in Rhodes. The earlier ones some of them were actually manufactured in the UK and assembled at Walsh Island Dockyard at Newcastle in New South Wales.
Yeah, and some of them weren't even made of steel. Some of them were made of
The
timber.
early ones, were timber.
So you had what was called, you had motor cars, and then you had trailers.
Yep.
This is the motor plate of... This is a plate of a trailer plate, trailer car.
As best we can tell.
So you definitely had. So that's what the numbers that came on them were actually on the actual plates. So to make sense, with the Tullochs, they had them stamped on the actual builder's plate, the actual serial number, and it appeared, on the number on the outside of the train.
Yes.
A lot of brass and against the floors. I mean, back in those days, you could smoke on a train.
You could. So that added to the nice smell of dust and brake shoe dust, and all the other dirt that accumulated in Sydney.
Yeah.
So they had a unique look, feel and smell, the old red rattlers.
Yeah, they did.
Because they had, how would you describe brake shoes? The brakes on them were basically a big, thick sort of pad that when the driver applied the brakes, this brake pad would jam against the wheel to stop the train. And these brake shoes created a lot of dust, and all that dust wound up in the passenger cars.
But when I used to travel to school, I used to get off a Red Rattler, and then when I got home,
Yes, that's right, too. Metal to metal.
we didn't have elevators. We had to
No,
climb up
not back
those,
then,
and it was
yeah.
all steel and concrete construction, and you had to go
Yes.
you had to go upstairs, and quite often there'd be a diesel train waiting at the station, and my favourite trains would have been are the 48 classes and the 42 classes.
Yeah,
stuff
this
like
is
that.
locomotive classes.
And these were diesel locos, and quite often there was, a 4 loco diesel sitting on the platform there, and as a kid, I'd get to the top of the platform, and of course a diesel train would be sitting in the station, and all you see from the top is all these fans that run across the top of the train, and as you know, the exhaust comes out where all the fans are.
Oh, yes, the train didn't wait if you were early, that's right. All the exhaust fans, yes, sorry, I was just replying to Sue's comment.
Which train didn't wait if you're early? Well, any train wouldn't wait.
Yeah, if the train was early, run up them steps fast, the train didn't wait.
Yeah,
No.
they didn't wait and pull out on time. No, there was none of that. If the train was early, you missed it.
Yep. Particularly if the train crew were going home at the end of the run. They
Yeah.
wanted to get home early.
As a kid, I remember looking at the drivers, and the drivers had a door, and it was all manual, and half the time in summer the doors would be left open,
Yeah.
and you would expect I was sitting on a seat. Some of them might have been sitting on a
No,
seat. I
that's
was sitting on a crate.
And sometimes on a footstool. I've
Yeah.
seen them as well.
Footstools, crates, whatever they could. Safety on trains has changed
Hugely.
immensely.
Yeah, Sue remembers the smoke coming out of the diesel loco fans.
She does.
She does.
Yeah. I used to sit there because on the top of the overpasses, you used to have, because it was electrified, you used to have a guard that stopped sparks, like stop you getting showered with sparks. Because
Spark arrestor.
Spark arrestor, yeah. And you did. If there wasn't anything there, you'd be whacked with sparks. So I'd stand there as a kid and look over that and look into all the fans on the top of the diesels. I was fascinated by it.
And a related story, but from years down the track, so to speak. When I was driving the passenger trains around Sydney, there's a point between Summerhill and Lewisham on the main line, where the 6 suburban passenger tracks cross over 2 tracks of the goods line. They cross on a bridge over the goods line that runs beneath them. And I had a report from train control saying another driver had reported smoke coming up from the sleepers in that area. And of course,
They used to, if I remember rightly, trains when I was a kid,
Yep.
they used to have like fuses in the bottom, and they used to fire
Yeah.
sparks across the tracks.
Yeah, they did sometimes. And so occasionally these wooden sleepers
It'd
caught fire.
Yeah.
And at first they'd start smouldering. They wouldn't just burst into flame. They'd start smouldering, and so you'd get smoke. And so anytime there was a report of smoke, you looked out to see what was going on. And train control would ask the other crews in the area to also keep a lookout. Anyway, I was driving along and I thought, knowing the location, knowing that there was these 2 light tracks underneath for the goods trains, freight trains, I had I decided as I approached the bridge to have a closer look. And sure enough, there's a freight train stopped with the locos on the freight train underneath the bridge. And the smoke was actually the exhaust from the locomotives coming up. The bridge wasn't a solid platform,
No.
and so the smoke was from the loco was coming up through the sleepers of the passenger tracks going over it, and that was the smoke. So I got onto train control and said, look, diesel train down there, it's producing exhaust. I think this is the cause of the smoke. I didn't hear anything else about it, so I guess that was the problem.
And the trains you drove weren't Red Rattlers.
No,
You started driving on CSETs, didn't you?
I started with railways as they were taking the Red Rattlers out of service, and by the time I got to driving, they were well and truly just in museums, or the few that were preserved. Yeah, so I started on the silver sets, as we called them.
Well, yeah, they were C's, D's.
They were S's, T's.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a few different set numbers. Can I get myself reading pack to me? All right,
Well, we'll just keep talking to
we'll keep
ourselves.
talking, and we'll
To that one person that happens to be Julie on the side there.
yeah.
The only other thing I can tell you what was interesting about Red Rattlers and probably C-sets is, I don't remember if any. Well, they don't use them anymore. They used to have, when the workmen were working on tracks. They used to have detonators.
Oh yes, yes.
Right, and they were basically a small explosive charge that they put into like a plastic cap, and it was probably, I don't know, the size of 2 Rubik's cubes, maybe.
It was about yay round.
Well, I remember them
know
like about this long, and they sat them on the tracks. So they were just a detonator sat on the tracks, and they were just explosive caps.
And
right?
when the train wheels ran over them, they would go bang.
And and kids
loudly
kids used to like to break into them and steal them, of course, as kids would be. So they would lock them up, and what they have is this isn't what's called a padlock, and it's called they class them as what's called an equipment locker.
Which
So,
they had these equipment
obviously-
lockers in the crew cabs.
I collect padlocks and vintage padlocks from trains. This one's from an SRA New South Wales one. And so these padlocks would be on the Red Rattlers, and they would be
Thanks, Sue.
thanks Sue, and they would be on the C sets and a lot of the old silver ones.
Yep.
And I've only recently learnt that some of those C sets were on the silver ones were made by Tulloch as well.
Some of them were, yes.
Yeah, and actually one of them was converted to diesel.
It
Had a
was
diesel loco on it, and it had a
was
diesel motor, so it was pulled by diesel locos.
it was about 10 or so silver cars from, pardon me, from the Sydney Electric system were taken down to Wollongong to provide local train services around there. And with no electricity, no electric wires and that at Wollongong, everything was hauled by diesel locomotives. So they hooked a 48 class up to the front of 2 or 3 of these silver cars from the Sydney system, and they had a some sort of. Hang on a minute. The generator they installed a generator in the rear car to provide power to operate the doors.
So that's right, and that's why you would see on those you would see a loco pulling them, and then
an exhaust pipe,
and
out
then
the back.
at the back one you would see smoke on the back of the actual carriage.
Yeah.
Coming out of the vents, which you would have assumed would have been like the air conditioning vents, and here you are with diesel smoke coming out of it.
Exactly.
And this is an old electric. Like a silver class was like I said, the C sets, a lot of from that area. So the ones that came after the old Red Rattlers.
Yeah.
And I don't know. So that's why I collect. See, padlocks are a huge part of railways, and if you're into railways, there's some the memorabilia I'm into is padlocks. I mean, there's lots of other bits of memorabilia. Some of the rare parts I can tell you in padlocks are like, padlocks were made in all shape and form and did a lot of jobs on railway. They weren't just put on doors. They weren't just put in equipment lockers.
They were put on
put on points. So this is an SL lock, and this is a government railway one. That's why it's got a GL on it. And they locked the points.
Yeah, they had a metal, thick metal
So
clip.
to give you another look at it,
and they would use the clip to lock the points in whatever position was required, and then this padlock would be put on that clip so it couldn't be removed.
Yeah, and so that
That was done if the normal means of operating the points had failed.
But they're all manual. I mean, there were some cable ones, and there was some air driven ones. But when we're
Yeah.
talking about there were manual points that were locked off. Anyway, so yeah.
And also you had trackside equipment cabinets, often related to points, in other cases related to the signalling. And these cabinets were locked with these sort of padlocks as well.
That's why I'll come back to it. And then we had they were called TS locks.
TS locks.
And that's a TS lock.
Yeah.
And they come in various shapes and forms, and you can go through nearly every state, and there was, they were just not put on the gates going into trains.
Yeah, that was another use.
But toilets, you name it. So
anywhere that you didn't want the public just to walk into or access would have a padlock on it. And
yeah, the odd thing about railways is they didn't use any modern padlock. It had to be one of these old ones, and they used these.
And often they were constructed in the railway workshops. These padlocks.
Yeah, exactly. They're made by some of them. They were Jackson ones, but see this one. See how nice and shiny this one is from the New South Wales SRA. This was done in the 80s.
Yeah.
Lockwood was making padlocks.
Yeah, State Rail Authority.
These were made by Jacksons as well.
Yeah, or SRA. They were the administration after the Public Transport Commission.
Yeah, so you had, I'm sorry if I'm joking around, I was supposed to be in a cradle, but that failed. So that's PTC. Yeah. And then you had, I've got another little one laying around here as well. But regardless, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so is there any stories you can tell people about what it's like to be a train driver?
What it's like is having to wander down Campbelltown Yard, which, let me try and give you an idea. It's about a kilometre and a half long in length from the platform. So I would arrive at the platform.
You often would have to start at McDonaldtown as well.
Oh yeah,
you started a lot of places.
I started a lot of different places, but my first depot as a train guard was Campbelltown Depot, and I lived at Liverpool at that stage. So I would catch the train to Campbelltown. In some cases, I had to catch what they call the night ride bus before the train started running for the day. So either way, I would arrive at Campbelltown station. I would sign on, deal with any paperwork. Then I'd have to walk anything up to 1.5 kilometres into the yard at like 3 a.m. And 3 a.m. in middle of winter, Campbelltown was it was horribly cold. Okay, I had a warm jacket on.
And look, probably these days they'd have a staff bus to ferry people, but
they didn't.
Quite often you would have to walk.
Oh yeah.
You'd get in through the gateway, and it'd be a long walk to where you picked up your train that was stable. A long walk to where you picked your
train up. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could what 1/2 kilometre, 1 kilometre?
Anything up to 1 kilometre.
I mean, and that's
the railway yard stretched halfway to the next station at Macarthur.
Yeah, so you'd have to walk, but you'd get off a normal train and then have to walk all that distance.
All that way down, and then
pick up your train, do all your testing, test all your doors, and if you had a problem with, if you had an electric train, a problem with the door, then you'd tell them that train was a no-go, or if it wasn't a no-go, you would have to lock off one of those cars.
Yep, all that
to make
sort
it
of
safe.
Yep, all that.
Yeah.
Campbelltown wasn't a train maintenance depot, so yes, if you had any failure, you had to make the train safe, or in some cases determine if the train could go into service that day.
So I'll stop. My leg was touching Julie's leg, and she shakes while she talks. I'm actually hanging on to the phone because our tripod and gimbal tripod had failed, so I'm doing this one, holding onto the phone.
Yeah, we probably should have checked that out first before we went live. But
we had it on a timer, and usually when we go live, we can set it straight away and have it in the horizontal version. But anyway, let's move on. That's just an equipment failure, and you've got to learn to just pick up and go.
You do. So that's one of the key things I remember, just being very cold very early morning, and it's just you want to be back home in bed, and instead you're seemingly out in the middle of nowhere. And the curious thing is, the end of Campbelltown Yard is near the site of the Fisher's Ghost legend too. So you have this
Fisher's
background.
Ghost.
Fisher's Ghost, yeah. Frederick Fisher was murdered by George Worrell. It's an early story from the Campbelltown area. And while George Worrell was caught for the crime, he was caught because another wanderer in the early morning saw Fred Fisher's ghost sitting on the fence and pointing to where Fred Fisher's body was later found. And so hence you've got the tale of Fisher's ghost.
Lucky I asked you, because I mean, all Fisher's Ghost would not have really helped people. That, you need to tell the story.
That's why
Can't assume everyone knows.
That's why I told the story. But the reference to it was, it's 3 a.m. It's okay. There's lighting in the rail yard, but it's reasonably dark outside of. It's dark around you, except where the light is.
The funny thing is that when I lived in Sydney, I'd be up at 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. I really didn't feel unsafe.
No, I didn't say I felt unsafe. It just had that the area and the location had that edge to it, because
I think the difference is
background legends.
In Sydney, there were so many overhead lights. The place glowed in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It's
well, that's true.
I used to think that Sydney never slept. I mean, for a while, in Sydney, there's that other thing I could tell you about. But growing up in Sydney, the trains never stopped. At a certain point, they brought in the night ride system.
Yeah,
but basically trains went through the night.
Years ago they used to, and then as a cost cutting measure, they replaced a lot of the early morning trains with a night ride bus system.
Oh, that was hopeless too.
I
found it hopeless. Delays were incredible. The benefit of getting on a train in Sydney was that, every 5 to 10 minutes back in the old days, there was a train.
Yeah, not at 2 a.m, Bridge.
No, we went every hour during the morning.
Yeah.
It was basically almost like the Sunday timetable.
Bridge tends to be a little more pessimistic than me. I found the night ride service on the whole quite reliable. I think they have begun to bring back some late night and early morning trains, at least on Friday and Saturday nights, but don't quote me on that.
And for those people that are just finding us here, welcome to our channel.
Yes.
We are Lost in South Oz, and we do South Australian history, South Australian rail usually, but every Friday, if we can get this crap together, we will work it out, and we like to talk to you guys. So if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat,
and we'll try and answer. And we've all, doing lives is, I do appear occasionally on friends, a couple of friends feeds that are on other channels, but I think we're going to have a regular thing on Fridays. And we won't always be talking about our early experiences in Sydney, but that was just what
we would hope
we thought of today.
We would hope that our subscribers would come in and have questions, because we actually like going around and looking at, I guess there's a lot of history in South Australia. We like popping in and, we've come across a lot of platforms that are in disrepair. Unfortunately, how do I explain this? I say a lot. To those that are unaware of the situation in South Australia on the railway, it's almost like a city rail system in Sydney, and I guess you'd have that in Melbourne.
Just on a slightly smaller scale.
Very much smaller scale. I mean, they are talking about extending the rail here, and I've alluded to that a few times, but in the north it finishes in Gawler.
Yep.
In the south?
The south, Seaford, I think.
Seaford. That's in one line. There's another one going out as well.
To Bel Air.
And to Bel Air, yeah. And is there any other extensions of the platform?
Well, you've got, the line to Port Adelaide, but the north-south extent of the system is Bel Air, Seaford, and
the line
Gawler.
to Port Adelaide. You mean the the line out to where you catch a ship, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. What's that one called again?
Outer
Outer
Harbour.
Harbour. And they
And
actually,
also Port Dock now. Port Dock's got its station back.
well, that's the end of the line there at Port Dock,
Yeah.
next to the
That's
National Railway
It's
Museum.
a small branch off the Outer Harbour line.
Which it wasn't the end of the line there years ago. That was connected into the outer harbour system.
It was. The Outer Harbour line actually ran down Vincent Street, the middle of the middle of Port Adelaide.
Well, the platform was sitting where the cop shop is now,
The platform
and the
yeah,
tracks went across the road.
went across the road and down Vincent
And
Street.
there was a connection going out towards Port Flat, which is
but that was a freight one.
the freight. But there was a lot of freight lines coming out of there.
Basically, the Port Adelaide business district was in the middle of essentially a giant rail yard. It had rail to the freight rail sidings and tracks to the west, on the east, north, and south.
And you know the markets that's now at. If you go down to Port Adelaide, there's like a lighthouse down on the dock there.
The old lighthouse.
Well, that's
there.
not in the original place.
No, that's
But
not.
There's like a market there. Like it was an old.
Yeah, it was called Fisherman Markets. It's not operating at the moment.
Well, if you go down there, you can see in the roadway. You'll see tracks embedded in the roadway.
Yes.
So the trains would come basically down the docks there.
They did. Where the ones that are currently embedded there, I don't think that's in their exact original position, but they're indicative of what was there. Except it wasn't just the bit you can see today. It went the whole length of the wharves along Port River.
I think the problem is there's so much in our heads from research on South Australia. You know, you pick a subject and you go out there, and there's so much information, like where the tracks ran. You know,
you go down rabbit holes with all sorts of topics.
And if we were to put all the information in those videos, it would just, I guess, it would just confuse and bore people.
And unfortunately, I don't make the time to sit down and put this into like a book or articles or whatever. I've started doing a little bit of that on the webpage. The link is in our description somewhere.
You just go to the channel, go to the top there, you'll find the channel description, and you'll see all the links up there.
But I haven't done anywhere near as much work as I should on that.
All the information on there is free. You don't need to join a subscription and pay money for that, like the channel. You know, it's free to subscribe to us.
It is.
Most people are used to the model where you pay money. Well,
we're not financial yet, so
we don't. Well, that's about membership on YouTube.
Yeah, so we can't do. It's
free to subscribe anyway.
Free to subscribe is regardless whether you're financial or not.
And Julie updates the website now and then. And
every now and then, a couple of times a year.
But you'll find further information there.
Yeah, there is some. What I have also got there is maps that I've created. I've traced using Google Earth as the backdrop.
You're shaking again.
Oh, okay. Using Google Earth as the backdrop and using old plans of track layouts.
Well, you go on to SAPA too. We gave someone a link in SAPA.
And the South Australian Property and Planning Atlas, which is publicly accessible on the internet.
And if you do it, if you're doing South Australian Railway, you're into history, maybe you have your own channel.
Yeah.
Look, there's physical evidence out there you're going to find physical evidence of platforms.
And you also find evidence in the property boundaries.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Usually when you look on SAPA, you're going to find on property boundaries this long thin bit where the old railway was. Now, one of the videos I think is coming up tomorrow or next week is on the old line that went to Plympton, which is the Holdfast Bay line.
Holdfast Bay, yes.
Yeah, and look, where you're going to find evidence of that is in SAPA.
Yeah.
Straight out. The only physical evidence that sits today is Plympton, half of Plympton platform, mind you, half of Plympton platform. So we're going into that history on a video happening tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. I'll have to have a look.
And I haven't got this map up there yet, but I take all the evidence from SAPA, from what we've seen on the ground, from the old track plans, and I sketch the layout of the tracks over Google Earth. then screenshot that and
So,
upload
so
that.
how to research this history, you're not just going onto onto Google and um, seeing what other people have put up there. You've got to do some of your own.
I'm aiming to create and keep creating my own material based on the research. It's based on research that other people have done and material they've gained access to. But what you're seeing with this map is a creation by
And in some
me.
cases, you have to pay money to stuff.
Sorry
about that.
With a lot of the track plans I've got, a fellow who used to work for the railways here acquired a lot of these, and look, understandably, because he's got to pay for having them accessible on the internet, he sells the plans.
Yeah.
And that's legit.
Look,
he's gained permission to do that.
I quite often see a lot of other YouTubers that put a lot of fancy music in their videos.
Yeah.
They do some catchy catchphrases. They show you some pictures. They even steal some photos and don't reference them properly.
Well, yeah.
And that really does, for some people out there, that's like
any photos we put up, we check that the copyright allows us to do that.
There is the YouTube is cracking down on people that are stealing other people's work, and we're very mindful that if we do use any material on our channel, that it is referenced properly and it is okay to use. And that's the important thing to remember, that the work we do is not done from borrowing other people's work.
It's all, look, every piece of work that somebody does is usually based on what someone else has done, and it's been built on by the person who's doing the new work. Mm-hmm. So that's just how research is done.
But you must.
Credit your sources.
You must credit your sources. So when you look at our videos, you'll see where we credit the music or the sound or whatever, and it'll be in the back of the video. And that's really important. And I think as a YouTuber, you've got to do that stuff.
And so with the maps I put up on the website, I've listed somewhere on the website in the bibliography where I've got my information from. So
coming up soon on the channel will be the National Railway video will be released, where we went around and toured the National Railway Museum. And that was quite interesting.
That was incredibly interesting, actually, more than I realised, and it connected a few dots for us. The one that really stood out for me was, I don't think we haven't actually done a video on South Hummocks. We've just visited the place.
Oh, South Hummocks. I mean, I don't know how they could have ever had a station at South Hummocks.
Yeah, at the head of Gulf of St Vincent, it's basically a huge marsh sort of area. And where did the line from Port Wakefield ran through there and on to, let me see, Wallaroo.
Oh, okay.
I think it went to Port Pirie as well. Don't quote me on that.
Well, we drove our car down there.
We drove our car to the location of the old South Hummocks station.
This is what it's like when you get out to South Hummocks, where South Hummocks station is.
Yeah.
There's a level crossing there. Now, if you put... Most people...
No gates, no lights, just a level crossing.
And the actual level crossing is steel.
Yeah.
Like RSJ. But that's it, just a couple of wire fences. But if you try to pull off the road, you'll go down to your axle.
Oh yeah, it's mud.
So I'm surprised that the actual railway and the locos could ride on those.
But South Hummocks they had bus services to the surrounding communities. And the buses met the train at, I think this was horse and coach days. That's how far back it goes.
But you can actually see where all the railway yards were there.
You can see,
It's still fenced off, just like in Sapper.
Because to build a railway line, they have to acquire the property, and that appears as a property boundary on the Property and Planning Atlas. And even if it's not owned by railways now, the property boundaries don't tend to change, because it takes a lot of work to go and amalgamate properties or subdivide properties. So often they're just left, and people buy this property and they buy the neighbouring property and run them together.
You're shaking the bed again.
I'm sorry.
We're sitting on a day bed.
And run them together, But on the planning atlas, the old property outline's still there. And so the outline of the rail corridor can still be seen. And what we found at the museum, cutting a long story a little shorter, was the station sign from South Hummocks. And I looked at that station sign hanging up on the wall and thought, wow, we've been there to look at what remains today. And it really connected the dots for me that South Hummocks wasn't just this basically vacant space like it is now. It actually was a station. And there's the sign. And that wasn't the only thing that I found amazing. And we saw the explosives van that ran on the Dry Creek to the wharf explosives line.
It's really hard to believe that the government would stick high explosives in a railway car.
Yeah. If you're travelling through Dry Creek Station today on an electric train, going into Adelaide or Gawler or in between, if you look to the west of the train coming from Adelaide, that will be on your left. Basically 200 metres from where your train is, there was a freight a goods shed, and that shed was the end of this little branch line, horse-drawn branch line that carried explosives.
Okay, well, this is probably getting on a bit long. People are popping in and popping out. Nobody's really in the chat there.
Yeah.
We did hope that we could have a chat with people, and we've got to thank Sue for coming in.
Yeah.
And chatting with us.
But look, this live will go up on the channel, so...
Yeah, well, look, there's apologies for the first part. We'll get this right, and hopefully it will be as streamlined next time. And equipment failures aside, we've moved on, and, thanks for everyone that's popped in. If it's the first time coming to our channel, thank you for... finding us. Please subscribe. We have a lot of videos coming. Our channel, as I've said before, is on railway and is on history. Sometimes they're separated. It's just South Australian history. Sometimes it's railway or railway history. But subscribe. We are going to do a live every Friday, and hopefully you come in to say hello.
And the live will be talking about bit behind the scenes stuff, what's
Things
coming
coming
up. We talk about our younger years, because that's where what we're doing now comes from.
Let's not get too bogged down, because that bores people. The reality is our younger years are in New South Wales, so our experiences of rail is completely different to what it was like in South Australia.
But it's what we bring now.
But also, we're discovering a lot of this stuff for ourselves, and we're letting our subscribers see that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming in. And I will say, I'm Bridget.
I'm Julie.
Bye for now, and take care.